The shovel bit into the red dirt with a sound like breaking bone. Each scrape was a heartbeat, and with every heartbeat, my brother went further away. The wind came in off the hills, carrying the smell of mesquite and the faint tang of gunpowder that seemed to linger on everything since yesterday. I told myself it was just in my head. But the scent stayed, dry and metallic, in the back of my throat. By the time the sun touched the ridge, the hole was ready. I laid him down myself. No preacher, no mourners, just me and the open land. I couldn't bring myself to cover his face at first. His jaw was still set in that stubborn way, as if even in death he was halfway to arguing with me. "You damn fool," I said under my breath. Somewhere behind me, a horse snorted. I froze. This land was empty for 10 miles in any direction, and no one had reason to be here. I straightened, my hand drifting toward the colt on my hip, and turned. A man sat his horse on the other side of the fence. Black coat, black hat pulled low, a shadow where his eyes should have been. The animal under him was a lean chestnut, restless, shifting from hoof to hoof. "Go on and finish," he said. His voice was rough but steady. I didn't answer. He didn't move closer, just watched as I scooped the dirt back over my brother. Every shovelful felt heavier. When it was done, I tamped it down with the back of the blade and laid a flat stone at the head. The stranger still sat there. "You gonna tell me your name?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Names don't much matter out here." "They do to me." He studied me for a long moment. "Call me Gray." I'd never heard of him. Out here, that was unusual. "What do you want?" I said. He dismounted with a slow, deliberate motion, like a man letting you know he meant no harm, but keeping his gun hand clear just the same. "Came to tell you," he said, "that the man who killed your brother is still breathing." I stared at him. "You saying the one the sheriff's got locked up ain't the one?" Gray nodded once. "Sheriff's wrong man. Always was." I didn't believe him. Sheriff Cobb was many things, lazy, short-tempered, partial to whiskey, but he wasn't in the habit of arresting the wrong man for a killing everyone saw happen in broad daylight. "I saw him get shot," I said. "Half the town did." Gray's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "You saw a man fall down, holding his chest. That don't mean the bullet came from the hand you think." Something about the way he said it, slow, measured, set a cold thread crawling up my spine. "You got proof?" I asked. "Got more than that," he said. "Got the truth. Question is, you want it?" We stood in the heat a long moment, the only sound the rattle of his horse's bit and the dry hiss of the wind in the grass. "What's in it for you?" I finally asked. "Nothing but righting a wrong. Men don't ride 10 miles out of town to right a wrong for nothing." He shrugged. "Maybe I liked your brother." "That was a lie. If he'd known my brother, I'd have known him." "Tell me who did it," I said. He shook his head. "You want the name? You ride with me. Won't take but a few hours." I almost told him to go to hell. I almost walked away. But something in his eyes, what little I could see under the brim, told me that if I didn't ride with him now, I might never know the truth. I looked down at the fresh mound of dirt. My brother had been stubborn, reckless, and half the time wrong, but he was blood. "Give me 10 minutes," I said. We rode in silence at first, keeping to the old cattle trail that wound along the ridge. Gray didn't hurry. He moved like a man who knew exactly how much daylight he had left and intended to use every minute of it. The land spread out below us, patches of scrub, dry creek beds, the occasional twisted cottonwood. Somewhere far off, a hawk screamed. "You from around here?" I asked. Here and there, he said. That mean yes or no? Means I've been where I needed to be. He wasn't giving me anything. I studied his rig, worn but well-kept saddle, extra canteen, rifle scabbard tied down on the left. The butt of a Winchester peeked from it. His revolver was a Colt Navy, blued steel worn to gray at the edges, tied low on his hip. Everything about him said he knew how to use it. You always drop in on funerals? I asked. Only when the dead deserve better than what they got. I let that sit. By midday, we hit the edge of the Badlands. Broken ground, red rock spires, the kind of place that eats men whole if they don't know the trails. Gray seemed to know them. We dropped into a narrow arroyo, following its twists, until the walls rose up so high the sun was just a strip of light overhead. Where exactly are we headed? I asked. Old mining camp, about an hour more. I didn't remember any camp out here. This country was played out before my time, but the old hands said there was nothing west of the ridge but rock and ghosts. As we rode, I kept trying to fit pieces together. My brother lying dead in the dust yesterday morning, the stranger showing up at his burial, claiming the killer was someone else. None of it made sense. Finally, I said, "You gonna tell me why you care who killed my brother?" Gray looked over at me. "You really want to know?" I asked, didn't I? "Because," he said, "the man who killed him is the same man I've been hunting for 2 years." We stopped to water the horses at a shallow pool where rain had collected. Gray knelt, filled his canteen, and when he stood again, his coat shifted just enough for me to see the edge of something tucked inside. A folded paper, worn soft at the creases. I didn't get a good look before he turned away. 2 years is a long time to chase a man, I said. Not when he's worth it. What did he do? Gray's eyes flicked to me. Same thing he did to your brother. Which was what, exactly? My brother had been found in the street with a hole through his chest, nothing missing from his pockets. No robbery. Cobb said it was over a card game the night before. Maybe it was. But Gray's tone said otherwise. By the time the sun started its slow slide, the camp came into view. A scatter of collapsed shacks, a rusted stamp mill, and one tall water tower leaning like it was half-drunk. The wind here carried the sour smell of old ore and something else underneath, something sharp, like burned grease. Gray reined up. We go on foot from here. We tied the horses in a patch of shade and moved in quiet, his boots barely crunching on the gravel. I followed, one hand near my Colt. From behind a half-fallen wall, he pointed toward the black mouth of a mine shaft. There, he said. That's where he's holed up. I peered into the shadow, saw nothing. You sure? Gray nodded once. He's in there. Then let's get him. Gray's mouth curved again, that same not-quite smile. We will. But first, you ought to know, he's expecting us. That was where the hairs rose on the back of my neck. How the hell would he know we were coming? I asked. Because, Gray said, I told him. I turned toward him, my hand going for the Colt. But his navy was already in his fist, the barrel low but steady. Easy, he said. Ain't time for that yet. I stared at him. You bring me out here to hand me over? Nothing like that, he said. You want the man who killed your brother? He's in there. But you're gonna hear something first. Something you ain't ready for. And before I could speak, he started walking toward the shaft, not looking back to see if I followed. The mine mouth yawned black and cold in the red rock. It looked dead, silent. But the way Gray kept his navy low and loose told me he didn't believe that for a second. I stayed a few paces back, my Colt in hand now. The air coming from the shaft was damp and sour, like something old had been left to rot down there. "You still ain't told me why he's expecting us," I said. Gray didn't stop walking. "Because I wanted him ready." "That don't make sense." He glanced over his shoulder. "You'll see." We stepped inside. The daylight shrank fast, the wooden timbers dripping black where old water stains had bled through. My boots crunched on gravel. Farther in, the air cooled until it raised goose flesh on my arms. Gray struck a match and lit a stub of lantern that hung from a nail. The glow caught his face, the hard line of his jaw. "How'd you know my brother?" I asked. "Didn't," he said. "Knew of him. Knew he was next." "Next for what?" Gray didn't answer. The tunnel sloped down, the smell of damp earth growing stronger. I kept my ears sharp for any sound ahead. A scrape, a cough, anything. "You sure this man's in here?" I asked. Gray's voice was steady. "I know his habits. I know where he sleeps. And I know he's got nowhere else to go." "How?" "Because I burned the last place he had." That stopped me for a second. "You run him here?" Gray kept moving. "A wounded animal runs to its hole. Always has." The way he said animal didn't sound like he was talking about a man at all. The shaft split in two. Gray didn't hesitate. Took the right fork without looking. That told me he'd been here before. I didn't like what that meant. "Suppose this is a trap," I said. "It is," Gray said. I stopped again. "You're walking me into a trap?" "Not walking. Leading." He glanced back. "You want your brother's killer. You have to look him in the eye. Only way it sticks." The words rattled me. He wasn't talking about law. He wasn't talking about justice. He was talking about something heavier. The tunnel narrowed until we had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The lantern light caught flecks of quartz in the walls, winking like eyes. Somewhere up ahead, faint and muffled, came the sound of metal on metal. Slow, deliberate. I looked at Gray. He nodded once. We moved slow, boots finding the quiet spots in the gravel. The sound grew clearer. A man working at something, maybe sharpening a blade. We rounded the bend. There, in the hollowed-out chamber at the tunnel's end, sat a figure on an upturned crate. He was hunched over, running a whetstone along the edge of a long knife. The blade caught the lantern light like fire. He looked up. I'd never seen his face before, but something in it made my stomach tighten. He had pale eyes, almost colorless, and a slackness to his mouth that didn't belong to a living man. Gray didn't raise his gun. He just said, "Evening, Cutter." The man's mouth twitched, maybe a smile. "You took your time." "Had to find the boy first," Gray said. Cutter's eyes slid to me. "This him?" Gray nodded. "Brother of the one you dropped in the street yesterday?" I felt my jaw tighten. "You admit to it?" Cutter set the whetstone down. "No reason not to. Your brother was a loudmouth. Made promises he couldn't keep." "What promises?" "That he'd keep his mouth shut." I stepped forward, Colt raised. "You killed him for talking?" Cutter didn't blink. "Some talk gets men killed. Just a question of who." My finger brushed the trigger. Gray's voice was calm. "Not yet." I glanced at him. "What do you mean, not yet? You dragged me here to listen," Gray said. "You don't know the half of it." I looked at Cutter. "Then tell me." He leaned back, knife resting across his knees. "Your brother was working for me." That hit me hard. "That's a damn lie." "No," Cutter said. "He was running my letters, carrying messages between towns. Harmless enough. Until one day, he opened one. I didn't want to believe it, but I remembered the way my brother used to vanish for days without saying where he'd been." "What was in it?" I asked. Cutter's pale eyes glittered. "The name of a man worth $1,000 in gold." The man Gray here's been chasing across half the territory. I turned to Gray. He didn't move. Why would my brother's name be on your list? I said. Cutter smiled thin. Wasn't his name, but he read it. That was enough. My mind was turning fast now. So you killed him to keep him quiet? Cutter nodded. And now, here you are. I started to lift my Colt higher, but Gray stepped between us. You're not killing him, he said to me. I stared at him. Why the hell not? Because, Gray said, Cutter's not the end of this. He's just the door you go through. What door? I said. The one that leads to the man who ordered your brother's death. The three of us stood there in the flickering light, the air thick and heavy. Cutter still had the knife. Gray still had the Navy. And me, I had more questions than bullets. Who's paying you? I asked Cutter. He looked at Gray, then back at me. You wouldn't live long enough to spend the answer. Gray's voice was hard. Tell him. Cutter shook his head. I talk. We all die. Gray stepped forward, close enough to shove the barrel of his Navy against Cutter's temple. Then we all die here. The silence was deep enough to hear my own heartbeat. Finally, Cutter spoke, low and flat. There's a man in Abilene, goes by Mercer. He's the one wants me keeping certain mouths closed. Your brother's was just one. I'd heard of Mercer. Cattle broker, rich, connected, but nothing that tied him to killing. What's he got to do with you? I asked Gray. Gray didn't take his eyes off Cutter. Mercer's the reason I've been hunting for 2 years, killed my partner, burned my place, left me with nothing but a list of the men he pays. And my brother got on that list, I said. Not by choice, Gray said. It was a lot to take in. My brother, killed not over cards, but for reading the wrong name. A cattle broker pulling strings from Abilene, and this stranger, Gray, using me to get to the next step in his own war. What now? I asked. Gray holstered the Navy. Now Cutter rides with us. I shook my head. You're insane. Gray looked at me, calm as ever. We take him to Mercer, alive. Only way we get him talking. Cutter grinned, teeth flashing. Or maybe I just cut my way out on the trail. Gray's tone was cold steel. You try, you die. We bound Cutter's hands, tied a short lead from his wrists to Gray's saddle horn, and rode out before full dark. The Badlands were worse by night, the shapes of rock like hunched men, the wind moaning through cracks. I kept my eyes on Cutter's back the whole time, my mind trying to stitch the pieces into something that made sense. You trust him? I asked Gray quietly, nodding at our prisoner. No, Gray said, but I trust he wants to stay alive more than he wants to run. For now. What happens when we reach Mercer? Gray's answer was soft. We make him pay. Hours passed. The moon came up cold and white over the ridge. Cutter didn't say a word. Gray didn't either. I thought about my brother, how he'd grin even when things were bad, how he'd bet his last coin on a losing hand just to see it through. He'd died for opening a letter. And I was riding through the night with the man who killed him, and the man who'd led me to him. Somewhere ahead, Abilene waited. And Mercer. And maybe the truth Gray still wasn't telling me. By the time we reached the flats east of Abilene, the moon was sinking low. The land out here was wide open, nowhere to hide. I could see for miles in every direction, sage, rock, and the glint of water in a distant stock pond. Gray reined in on a rise and looked south. We make camp here. Ride in at first light. Cutter gave a short laugh. Mercer's not going to sit still for you to stroll in and ask questions. Gray dismounted, ignoring him. That's why you're going first. We set a small fire, more for the horses than for us, just enough light to see the ground. Gray kept Cutter's lead rope looped around his wrist while he worked, every move slow and deliberate, like a man who'd done this with prisoners before. "You ever think," Cutter said after a while, "that maybe Mercer's expecting you too?" Gray didn't answer. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my brother lying in the dust, the red spreading under him, his eyes wide in that final shock. The words Cutter had said, "Your brother was working for me," wouldn't leave my head. Somewhere past midnight, I heard movement. Not the horses. Boots. My hand went to my Colt, and I rolled up onto one elbow. Gray was standing over Cutter, holding that folded paper I'd seen in the mine. "What's that?" I asked. Gray didn't look at me. "Names." "What names?" He glanced my way, eyes cold in the firelight. "The rest of Mercer's list." Dawn came pale and fast. We broke camp and rode toward Abilene, the ground flattening under the horses' hooves. The closer we got, the more my gut tightened. "You sure Mercer's in town?" I asked. Gray nodded. "He doesn't leave during cattle week. Too much money to move." "And we just walk in with Cutter on a string?" "That's the idea." It was a bad idea. Men like Mercer didn't get rich by letting trouble walk through the front door. Abilene rose out of the dust. Two long streets lined with false front buildings, hitch rails full of horses, and the smell of smoke and sweat thick in the air. Cattlemen shouted over the bawling herds being driven past, the noise carrying down the street like a river. Gray didn't slow. We rode straight down the main drag, Cutter on foot between us, his wrists bound. Folks stopped and stared. 3 hard men in a line, one of them roped like a steer. We stopped outside the Grand Exchange, Mercer's place. It was the only building with fresh paint, a second story, and a polished rail out front. Gray swung down. "Keep your eyes open," he said to me. Inside, the Grand Exchange was quiet, the air smelling of cigar smoke and leather. Men sat at card tables, talking low. At the far end, behind a desk big enough to serve supper on, sat Mercer. He was heavier than I expected, but his eyes were sharp and quick. He didn't stand when we came in. "Mr. Gray," he said, voice smooth as oiled hinges. "You've been busy." "Brought you something," Gray said, shoving Cutter forward. Mercer's gaze slid over him like he was looking at a side of beef. "Alive? That's a surprise." "Needs to talk first," Gray said. Mercer smiled faint. "Does he now?" The room went still. Men at the card tables stopped playing. I counted at least 6 of them, all watching us with hands too close to their guns. Cutter's pale eyes flicked to me. "Tell him, Gray." Mercer's smile didn't move, but his eyes cooled. "Tell me what?" "That you ordered my death," Cutter said. "And his brother's." The air thickened. Mercer leaned back in his chair. "Is that what you've been telling people?" Cutter didn't flinch. "It's the truth." Mercer looked at Gray. "And you believe him?" Gray's voice was flat. "I know it." That's when I saw it. The quick look between them. Not strangers, not enemies. Something else. I felt my stomach drop. "Gray, what is this?" He didn't answer. Mercer's smile returned, slow and easy. "Your friend here's been working for me a long time. Brings me men like Cutter. Keeps the noise down." I stared at Gray. "That true?" He met my eyes, and for the first time since I'd known him, there was no mask. "I brought your brother in, yes, but I didn't know Mercer would have him shot in the street." The floor felt like it shifted under me. "You used him," I said. Gray's jaw tightened. "I needed information. Your brother was in the right place. I didn't plan for him to die." Cutter laughed sharp. "Didn't stop you from coming to his funeral." I swung my Colt up, but Mercer's men were faster, 3 barrels pointing at me before I could breathe. "Put it down," Mercer said softly. I didn't. That was when everything broke loose. A shot cracked from somewhere behind me, glass shattering overhead. I dropped to the floor as Gray dove sideways, his navy barking twice. One of Mercer's men went down screaming. Cutter lunged for the nearest gun, his wrists snapping the rope like it was twine. He slammed the butt into a man's face and grabbed the fallen revolver. The room turned to thunder, shots, shouts, smoke burning my eyes. I crawled behind a card table and fired at the shapes in the haze. One went down. Another cursed and staggered. Through it all, Mercer stayed behind his desk, calm as stone, a small derringer in his hand. I saw Gray moving toward him, fast and low. Mercer raised the derringer, fired once, missed. Gray was on him, slamming him back against the wall. "You killed my partner," Gray snarled. Mercer's voice was steady, even with Gray's forearm across his throat. "And I'll kill you, too." I didn't hear the rest. Cutter was suddenly at my side, grabbing my arm. "We're leaving." "I'm not leaving without—" "Gray's not who you think," Cutter snapped. "You want Mercer? You get him through me. Let's go." We burst out the side door into the alley, gunfire still rattling inside. Cutter had a horse waiting. Don't ask me how. And we were in the saddle before I could think. "Where the hell are we going?" I shouted over the wind as we tore down the back street. "Out of town," Cutter said. "You ride with me now." And just like that, I realized. At dawn, I'd buried my brother. By nightfall, I'd been riding with his killer. Now I was riding with the man who might be worse. That's the end of Part 3. We've had the betrayal reveal, the shootout, and a shifting of alliances heading into Part 4's final confrontation. Next, Part 4 will close the loop. Mercer's last play, the narrator's reckoning with Gray and Cutter, and the emotional payoff for the brothers' death. We rode hard until Abilene was just a smear of dust in the dark. The moon had dropped low, and the only sound was the drum of the horses and the dry rasp of my own breathing. Cutter didn't slow until we hit the mesquite flats. Then he reined up and looked back, eyes pale and cold. "You understand now?" he said. I yanked my horse around to face him. "Understand what? That you're using me same as Gray did?" "I kept you alive back there," Cutter said. "If you'd stayed, Mercer's men would have dropped you where you stood. Gray, too, if he's still breathing. You killed my brother." Cutter's jaw worked once. "I did, and I ain't asking forgiveness. But you've got a choice now. Keep chasing one dead man, or take the one who gave the order." I wanted to put a bullet in him right there. My hand even brushed the Colt's grip. But the truth was, if Mercer had ordered my brother's killing, ending Cutter here wouldn't close the wound. "You know where Mercer will go now?" I asked. Cutter nodded. "North. He's got a ranch up past the Brazos. Keeps a private crew there, men more loyal than the ones you saw in town. We catch him before he gets there. We might stand a chance." "And Gray?" I said. Cutter's pale eyes gave nothing. "If he's alive, he'll be coming too. But you'd better figure out if you want him at your back or in your sights." We rode north under the last of the moon. The country turned rough, low ridges, dry washes, thorn scrub that clawed at our legs when we cut through narrow draws. I'd lost all sense of time when we saw the glow ahead. Campfire. We slowed, staying in the dark, and crept closer. 2 horses were tied up by a low mesquite. A figure sat on a log, head down, cleaning a revolver in the firelight. It was Gray. I should have drawn on him then, should have settled it before another word was spoken. But he looked up, saw us, and for the first time, I saw something close to relief in his face. You made it out, he said. Barely, I said. Thanks to Cutter. Gray's gaze slid to him. You should have run while you had the chance. Cutter smiled thin. And miss the fun? Mercer's running north. Gray stood. Then we ride. I stepped between them. Hold it. Both of you used my brother. One of you pulled the trigger. I'm not riding another mile until I know which one of you I'm putting in the ground first. Silence. The fire popped. Gray said, Cutter shot him. Mercer ordered it. Cutter said, Gray set him up. Mercer paid for it. They both looked at me like I was holding the deciding vote in a game where the loser dies. In the end, I holstered my Colt and said, Fine. You both want Mercer? You're both riding with me. But the second I see either of you reach for something that ain't him, I don't hesitate. They didn't argue. We saddled up and moved out, keeping the fire's glow behind us. We found Mercer's trail at first light, a line of fresh prints heading north, one wagon and at least 6 riders. He wasn't running fast. He thought Abilene had been the danger. By midday, the land opened into a shallow valley. There, sitting like a fort in the middle of nowhere, was a low stone house with a corral and windmill. Men moved among the outbuildings, rifles in their hands. Cutter counted. 8, not including Mercer. Gray checked his Winchester. Then we do this quick. We split, Gray to the east, Cutter to the west, me coming straight down the middle. The plan was simple. Hit them before they knew they were hit. It worked for about 30 seconds. I dropped the first guard near the windmill, my shot snapping the quiet wide open. Gray's Winchester cracked twice from the ridge, dropping 2 more. Cutter came in hard from the far side, his pistol barking. Then the air filled with bullets. I hit the dirt behind a trough as rounds chewed the boards. Gray was somewhere ahead, shouting. Cutter had vanished into the smoke and dust. Through the chaos, I saw Mercer bolt from the house toward the wagon. I ran low, keeping the trough between us until I could cut him off. He saw me too late. End of the line, Mercer, I said, Colt leveled. He froze, hands halfway up. Listen, your brother was nothing to me. It was Gray who... A shot tore the air. Mercer's eyes went wide, and he dropped face first in the dust. Behind him stood Cutter, gun still smoking. I swung my Colt toward him. Why? Cutter shrugged. Dead men don't talk. And you wanted him dead, didn't you? That was my choice, I said, stepping closer. Gray came up behind me then, his navy drawn. Step away from him, kid. We stood in a perfect triangle, me, Cutter, Gray, guns ready, dust swirling around our boots. Cutter smiled faint. Well, Gray, looks like we're back where we started. Gray's voice was low. Only difference is, I ain't missing this time. I didn't wait to see who fired first. I put a bullet through Cutter's chest. He staggered, eyes wide, then dropped beside Mercer. For a moment, the only sound was the wind in the corral boards. Gray holstered his gun. Guess that's done. I looked at him. Not yet. His eyes narrowed. You aiming to finish this? I thought about my brother, about the truth I'd pieced together, that Gray had brought him into Mercer's orbit, and that without that, none of this would have happened. But killing Gray here would make me no better than the men I'd spent the day hunting. Get out of my sight, I said, and if I see you again, I don't give you the chance to talk. Gray studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. He mounted up and rode north, the dust swallowing him quick. I buried Mercer and Cutter in the valley, marking their graves with stones, left their names off. By sundown, I was riding south, back toward the little mound of dirt where it had all started that morning. I didn't know if I'd found justice, but I knew I'd found an ending.